Hello. I wrote to Darren Henry that the climate crisis presents the greatest ever opportunity for art to show its value to everyone. Thanks to Neil Butler and the Moving Out team for an opportunity to explain. Robert Sokolov observed that before climate change, everyday people have been more concerned with planetary safety than scientists, for example, nuclear power, older mass, etc. Climate has been slow to get through to everyday people. In the 70s, James Hansen, the first great scientist climate modeler, was so frustrated that he became a street activist, and 40 years later in 2011 was arrested at a demonstration outside the White House. Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion consists of terrified and angry children begging adults to respect science. Polls suggest an increase in everyday awareness from 41% in 2015 to over 50% in October 21. That leaves 40% still in denial, some very actively protecting vested interests. 50 years of peer-reviewed science has not yet universally communicated the exponential specieside threatening the end of life on Earth. Even for those who accept the science, there is a veil between the words and what they mean. How can we look straight at it? We wouldn't be here talking. We would be screaming or paralyzed with terror or overcome sobbing on the floor or numbly impassive like so many people who have already lost everything to fires and floods. George Marshall found more than usual denial or lack of interest in planetary warming in the storm-battered coast of the USA, thereby refuting the notion that denial is solely about visibility. Douglas Adams, in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, describes a vertical landing of a bistro in the middle of a match at Lourdes that no one acknowledges because it has such a high SEP rating, i.e. somebody else's problem. To acknowledge the anomaly means having to do something about it, like, for example, get psychiatric help in that instance. You can see the analogy. Adams was an artist environmentalist. We need to take very serious note of the SEP, somebody else's problem, factor. Studying, denying what is right in front of you is often a group response. It is a specifically human trait and nothing to do with ostriches with their heads in the sand checking their buried eggs. I have concluded from a study of denial that its syndrome of symptoms is a community-conformed and factually immune ideology, similar to religion in many respects, buttressed with irrationality, emotion, and short-term practicality. Its main constituents are confirmation bias, social taboo, peer group identity, sublimation of fear of personal mortality, fear of facing lost meaning and lost immortality through a loss of future for descendants, fear of inconvenience, loss of income, and practical problems. What denial therapy can an open-air artist stroke event organizer offer? At this year's NASA, I proposed a cross-disciplinary open-air event model, combining science, art, games, community, and action in a positive framework of change rather than a fearful warning. The model received endorsement and has been tested. This August, we launched Insectopolis City of Insects Urban Oasis in a local tour of the North. It was funded by Arts Council National Lottery Project Grant and a Goodman Award from the Royal Entomological Society. The project was aimed at making people aware of insect depletion and the value and sound research basis of conserving insects in towns. Conserving insects encounters insectophobia and a hardwired antagonism, fear of pestilence and insect-transmitted disease, and belief that insects are made to be swatted. In addition, suspicion that someone who is interested in insects is mentally unhinged. Conservation research indicates that the best argument is that we are survival codependent. We need insects for pollination, crop pest control, water cleaning, and soil creation. Research also recommends oblique and tangential approaches to develop intrinsic appreciation of insects and direct engagement in creating insect homes and food. 1. Street art, straight to everyday people. Insectopolis street art became a microscope as species-specific giant bees and butterflies danced with children and adults and explained the insect perspective in gardens, streets, and the University of Central Lancashire. Games as oblique learning tools and temporary community magnets. Our giant original painted lady jigsaw captivated teams of up to 14 people who could learn about this butterfly. Community building, science in its most publicly accessible form are stories stripped of gatekeeper vocabulary. In Insectopolis, we presented the public with information pop-ups checked by leading entomologists and had countless conversations, both teaching and learning. 5. Action, individual and group. By this is meant doing something. For example, litter picking, planting trees, recycling, creating a non-carbon power source, sharing locally grown vegan food treats, becoming a vegan. In our case, this was planting pollinator-friendly flowers. Despite the difficulties in some locations, this was a big success. The permissions process often included a lesson in insect depletion and conservation for gardeners and council officials. The planting process was very enjoyable and left a legacy of flowers in different sites. In one site where we could not get permission, we gave away pollinator plants as rewards for filled-in monitoring questionnaires. We knew those Pulmonaria and Facilia plants would have good homes, and we gained useful research data. Families helped. Children love insects most. They experience planting a flower with profound gravity, and questions fly, and eureka moments ensue with parents and observers. Biodiversity is a great way to kickstart individual and small community planet action. Biodiversity regeneration challenges the somebody else's problem passivity, as there are so many things to do and so many things not to do. Scruffination, no-mow, flower power in gardens, allotments, window boxes, parks, and waste ground wildflower bombing raids. Also in lobbying against chemical and light pollution, starting with banning insecticides in towns has already been achieved in France. Not eating meat, thereby saving tropical forests. If we remove pesticides and create more habitat for wildflowers and reduce the artificial light filling the night sky that is killing insects, we also re-enable soil creation and carbon sinking and reduce use of carbon power. This cross-relationship between the biodiversity crisis and the climate change crisis is ubiquitous. All the parts relate to the whole. Biodiversity may be the most accessible starting point for climate activism as tangible action leads to understanding. Climate change denial can seem more attractive than the austerities of eco-commitment. Barbara Kingsolver writes, the word environmentalism has become a civic hand grenade. Throw it into a crowd and watch everybody run to opposite sides of the room, arms crossed, glowering. On one side are folks who see the world as a garden we are entitled to reap to our best immediate advantage. On the other are those who see it as a living home in dire need of long-term protection. This division of humanity is the last thing we need in this crisis. It needs art as a healing force. Kate Soper unifies these binary communities with an alternative hedonism, subtracting asceticism from environmentalism. The implied challenge of her view is to show, or better demonstrate, art and other methods that we will have more pleasure and fun as environmentalists enjoying pollinator cities full of nature with clean air, plant-based food, art and organic wine, and say consuming deforestation steak or the last fish in the sea. I dreamed of scientists and artists learning each other's skills and swapping roles. Our team of performers have picked up enough science to explain insect issues. The metamorphic dream peaked spectacularly in Lancashire on the 23rd of October, when Syrian Sumner, professor of behavioral ecology at UCL and specialist in eusocial wasps, and a celebrity of new internationalist fame, donned our Vespula vulgaris common yellow jacket wasp costume, and as a wasp explained to the mesmerized audience of children and parents how much we need and will need wasps for pest control and pollination. Later, she joined our wild dance of the insect. Denial is so complex and massive that it has generated climate psychology. a new field of study with subcategories in the various departments of planetary concern, each one featuring different problems of resistance and denial. Artists need to know the science and the resistance psychology of their chosen area. I have been repeatedly amazed by the pleasure of entomologists at our street theatre images of giant insects. They've been turned back into children discovering their first butterfly or beetle. This power of art has enabled our collaboration with some of the leading insect experts in the UK who have joined our Insectopolis City of Insects Facebook group. Lucy Wood wrote, "Artists and scientists are natural collaborators. Both are explorers and storytellers, seeking out new ways of understanding, communicating, and indeed changing the world around them." So when it comes to the dry or simply terrifying language of climate science, the marriage of the two can be particularly fruitful. Artists can respond to environmental data in work that provokes real engagement by communicating these issues in lateral, innovative ways, by using humor and humanity, can reach us on a more animal, cellular level, and therefore, hopefully, demand our response. Hope arising from identifying the irrational force of community conformism as the primary resistance is that if, and that is a big if, we can turn it around with attractive new communities, it could play well into our cause and accelerate change fast. I have repeatedly observed that events create communities. Sustaining eco-communities formed at events and their legacies, as is happening here, is vital. Facts alone will not succeed. Art can place rational thought and logic in its context in the human psyche, among other human powers like empathy, imagination, beauty, humor, stories, intuition, friendship, and love. Art in all its myriad forms could be the keystone. Science must lose its gatekeeper vocabulary, and so must art. Art also may at times need modesty and discipline in its role of helping science to communicate environmentalism. The many cross-disciplinary initiatives which I've seen springing up all round in Atlas of the Future and elsewhere inspire me with positive hope that our communities of good humor, resolve, and action will entice away from well-financed denial. And everyday people will compel their governments to take all the steps necessary to put our beautiful planet on the road to recovery.